free speech cases you'll find, if you look into them, from the trial of Socrates onwards, have been to do with blasphemy. Socrates, Galileo, Spinoza, you can fill in blanks for yourself. Almost always that someone is accused to have gone too far this time and to have outraged the sensibilities of the community as well as the laws and codes of the state and the city and profaned the gods, which you really can't have, because then where would we be? How would we know how to behave if it wasn't for a celestial dictatorship? We wouldn't know right from wrong without that. So it's a really subversive thing to be doing. I thought, well, that's pretty easy. But we should do better perhaps than just get the usual suspects to sign the usual free speech petition. Maybe we should all say, since the fatwa explicitly applies to all those responsible for publication of the book, a missing codicil that's often not mentioned, we should all sign a petition saying we consider ourselves co-responsible, on the model of Spartacus or the Danish volunteers in the Nazi occupation who said, if the Jews are made to wear a yellow star, we'll wear one too, and they can't get us all. So, I thought it was a good idea, just to up the ante a bit. And then Susan Sontag, to whom I also would like to dedicate any value to you that these remarks may possess, and to her memory, who was that year's president of Penn, fortunately, it came the horrible news that a lot of people were strangely reluctant to sign. That the fear factor, the feeling that the Ayatollah Khomeini's arm could reach that far, that death squads were on the prowl, that anyone who got too closely identified with this might themselves become the object of a hit, was actually keeping away some people from the meeting we planned to have to read from Salman's book, and keeping their names off the list. They said, no, I don't want to sign. And I tell this story in my upcoming memoir. I don't want to say anything at all to undermine the memory of Arthur, but there was a crisis with him. And he said, you know what, you probably don't need me. After all, I'm Jewish. It would only attract attention. It would change the subject. It's amazing how persuasive fear can be. You can always think of a good reason. I'll behave better next time. Maybe this isn't such a crux after all. And I remember thinking, this really is for me a moral and intellectual and personal crisis, because if the author of The Crucible has decided that this is an appointment he's reluctant to keep, then we're all in very grave trouble. But of course, the story has a happy ending, and Arthur came through very well, as did a number of other people who'd hesitated. But I'll never forget that week and what I learned about how fragile, how tenuous the commitment of the society to its basic values often is, and how easy it is to panic people into betraying them. And I'll stay with this trope, if you don't mind, because I think it's back, and I think the rot is spreading. And I think it began this present phase about exactly 5 years ago, when a small newspaper in the Jutland area of Denmark, called Jyllands-Posten, published you'll know about this, some cartoons, better to say caricatures actually, of the figure of the Prophet Muhammad, who it's wrongly thought cannot ever be represented in art. There are several Islamic representations of him, particularly in Persian culture, oddly enough. It's not a prohibition that is of any great value or of any great force, though it's believed to be by people who like to find cultural reasons, as they often do, for political cowardice and moral cowardice. At any rate, you know the sequel. There was an organized attempt to destroy the Danish economy by boycott, coordinated by some very extreme mullahs in Denmark with some partners of theirs in other countries. There was an open season on Danish people, many of whom were attacked in other countries. By the end of it, we think at least 300 people were killed, and not all of them Danish, in different countries. There were riots between Muslims and Christians in Nigeria, in countries where demonstrations are never normally allowed at all and where the police control everything, such as Syria. Large crowds were allowed to burn down the Danish embassy without any apparent police intervention. The thing had every appearance of a horrible orchestration. I thought, well, here again, what could be a clearer case? Here is a small Scandinavian democracy which had a fairly heroic record of resistance to Nazism. Its citizens are peaceful. Its government is not allowed by law to censor the press. The demand was that the government close that paper and apologize for its publication. The Danish Prime Minister said, I can't do that. I have no right in law to affect the publication of cartoons or articles in Denmark. But at least the Friends of Denmark will show their faces now, and we'll have a proper discussion about this full frontal challenge to the values of the First Amendment. Can't wait to see, for example, what the State Department will say. The Bush State Department, here's a chance for it to really stick out its chest and testify for real values. Well, the Bush State Department made a statement saying, we're very sorry about any offense caused by the Danish cartoons. Now, we don't keep a State Department going to comment on the internal affairs of Danish journalism. The State Department could reasonably have said that wasn't its job. Its job is to say, we stand by our democratic allies, and we particularly feel appalled at the violation of its diplomatic immunity and the sovereign protection of its diplomat. Couldn't even go that far. The first thing was to apologize. Well, that's bad, but I'm not a diplomat. I live in Washington, but I'm not a politician. I'm a journalist. I thought, well, my profession, my great profession will stick up on this point, and we'll have a proper discussion. And the first thing is to show the cartoons, because people must see what the fuss is about. I mean, if we don't live now in the age of the image, where do we live?